Hi, I'm John Green, David Toshak, and this is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to be talking about communism in China. To understand communism in China, we're going to have to understand how communism started in China, and to do that, we're going to have to take a look at the Chinese Civil War. Now, it all first started with a man named Sun Yat-sen, who's this guy right here. This radical fella was the leader of the KMT, or the Chinese Nationalist Party. Sun wanted to unite all of China after the downfall of the Qing, which left China fragmented with multiple independent warlords who were doing their own thing. However, Sun was ultimately not successful in this movement, and later, the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, started to rise to power. As you can imagine, these two parties were not fond of each other, and both wanted to unite China under their own ideology. Thus, in 1927, the Chinese Civil War began and lasted until about 1949 and ended with the triumph of the CCP over the KMT. While nationalist leaders were fleeing to Taiwan, the CCP started to consolidate its power through social, economic, and political reforms, betokening the true beginning of communism in China.
Mr. Toshak, didn't the Chinese Civil War started because of the filthy nationalists dirty the purity of China with their bourgeoisie ways?
Oh, me from the past, you silly communist. You are partially correct. The Chinese Civil War did start because the KMT leader,
Chiang Kai-shek,
launched a large-scale military assault on the CCP's territory in northern China. Okay, sorry. During the early phase of the Chinese Civil War, the KMT had an advantage because of support from the United States. But during World War II, the CCP was able to salvage firearms and weapons left over from Japan. This, combined with support from the Soviet Union, helped the CCP gain an even larger advantage following 1945. But going back to the end of the Chinese Civil War, as a result of the Chinese Communist Party takeover, Mao Zedong! Mao Zedong was a fierce advocate for communism in China and led the CCP from 1935 until his death in 1976. During the Chinese Civil War, Mao helped found the Chinese Workers' and Peasants' Red Army, led the
Jiangxi
Soviet's radical land policies, and led the Long March, a 6,000-mile historic trek of Chinese communists which resulted in the relocation of the Communist Revolutionary Base from southeastern to northwestern China, and in the emergence of Mao Zedong as the undisputed party leader. During his leadership of the CCP, Mao implemented many radical reforms to help aid China in becoming an ideal communist society, while simultaneously maintaining and gaining more support for communism itself. One of the most significant of these reforms was the Great Leap Forward. But what was the Great Leap Forward, and why was it so important? Let's go to the thought bubble. Thanks, thought bubble. With the failure of the previous campaign, Mao launched another one. The idea of this new campaign was to re-centralize power, funneling it back to Mao. He began mass spreading Maoism ideals and messages throughout China, trying to get people to rid China of all capitalist influence. This movement had a great influence on the teenagers of China, who started a pseudo-military known as the Red Guard. The Red Guard was feared by all in China, as those deemed as counter-revolutionary by the Red Guard were often publicly shamed and killed. The Red Guard was ruthless, and one did not have to be capitalist to incur their wrath. In the end, the Cultural Revolution was successful in removing landlords and other privileged Chinese people, but also devastated the Chinese economy. After Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping was able to come into power. Xiaoping, who had actually had his power purged 3 times during the Cultural Revolution, was able to make his gradual climb to leadership through different reforms that also earned him the nickname the Architect of Modern China. I think I'm talking fast again.